All right.
We're starting? Okay.
Hey.
How are you?
Okay.
So I'm gonna turn the camera on.
It's your favorite.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Policy Committee. I'm Mrs. Hickson, Sandra Hickson, Policy Chair. And we have, thank you for the distinguished guests that are here today and everyone that's been coming so far. So I'm going to turn over the meeting to them. We're going to have a lively discussion. They're going to give us some statistics. And next month, we are actually, thanks to my esteemed Sora Gabe Chase and Tanita LaShore, we're going to have someone here from ISB. They're actually coming to train us on press policy. And they're going to train us quarterly, and then they're going to let us go. And then I'll decide who is actually going to keep up with press policy next month. Okay? Without further ado, let's get going.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I don't think that's special, I guess. but thank you, Board Member Hickson and Ms. Horton for inviting us. I'm Garrett Smellies, the District Coordinator of Data and Enrollment.
And I am Alex Ashoff. I am the District Coordinator of Data and Assessment.
So the two of us work hand in hand as part of our data team for the district, handling all the different data points that we have, because we have a lot of them. And attendance is one of them. And we were asked to come here today to talk about attendance. And the first piece is really stand. So we can't make any policy or decisions about attendance until we know how does the number that we see, how does that number get spit out by ISB and by our own systems in Power School. So we've got three very short slides here just to give everyone an overview of what attendance is. So first is what makes an attendance day, a full day, a half day, or a 0 day. And that is really based on how many minutes the student is in school, is in class. So if we have an 8-period day, lunch is the 8th period. Lunch does not count for attendance because it is not instruction, nor does the passing period. So when you look at the length of the school day, take lunch out and take all the passing periods out, we have 350 minutes of full instruction for a school day. So if the student is here 7 periods, they get 350. Okay, got it? Yeah, thank you. So you get 350 minutes of instruction, so they get a full day of attendance. If they have 300 minutes, they miss one class, they still get a full day of attendance because.
Yeah, sure. So with the Illinois State Board of Education, when our teachers are taking attendance, these are the only 3 options when we are reporting to the state of Illinois. So we report to Illinois State Board of Education Student Information System. That's what they call it, SIS for short, SIS. Where Power School is our local SIS, our local Student Information System. We can either, for a student, we can either report that the student was present for a full day of attendance, the student was present for a half day of attendance, or the student received 0 credit of attendance for that day. So those are the only 3 options, a 0 for a student, a 0.5, or a 1. So Mr. Smellies was just explaining how they would get that 1 full day of attendance. They have to be in school receiving instruction for a minimum of 300 minutes. So our only options there are the student must be present for all 7 instructional periods, or if they are absent for 1 instructional period and they're present for 6 periods, that still counts as a full day. But the moment a student misses 2 instructional periods, so they were present for 5 of those instructional periods, and they were they're present for whatever those periods were, that only counts as a half day of attendance. And this is regardless of excuse for that absence. We're gonna kind of get into that minutia with the definition later, but even if the student gets called in by mom or dad or guardian, whoever, if they get called in for 3 periods and they were present for only 5 days, that counts as a half or a 0.5 for attendance.
And I'll leave part of the board policy with you, Mrs. Hickson, the ISB policy. So you can see the statutes that this is linking to. One question I know that'll come up is, say the student is late to class. You know, the student walks in, it's a 50-minute period, the student walks in a half hour late. So we would think, oh, the student is only there for 20 minutes of the class period. So the ISB policy asks, can students be counted present if they are in attendance for a portion of the class period? So I'll read that again, it's not on the screen. Can students be counted present if they are in attendance for a portion of the class period? And the answer is yes. For schools that offer a regular schedule, which is us, we offer a regular schedule. It's not like a time card where the student punches in and you're counted for that many minutes in. It's attendance is counted in, as you can see, in 50-minute increments. So
if a student gets to school 15 minutes before the class, they still there like for a whole day?
Yeah, as long as that teacher then inputs that attendance. That's something that during our district institute, that was one of the things that we spoke about too, that how important it is to make sure at the start of the period and at the end of the period, that you just make sure, do that head count, check that attendance, and make sure that you take that attendance in our school.
yes, ma'am.
So, this is very clear, I understand all of this.
Okay.
But this talks about students who are coming to school
Correct.
and either missing some periods, but they're present in school. And I know that truancy and chronic absenteeism have different definitions under the
Yes.
school code. And I think, and I don't know if you're gonna get to this, but the question that I have is the students who don't come to school at all, who then rise to the level of either truancy or chronic absenteeism, and then what do we have in place to support the students that don't come at all? Because it's a different issue when a student comes to school and chooses or doesn't attend classes, because then my question is, why aren't they in their classes, where are they, and why isn't somebody following up on that? But my other thing is if we have children who are not coming to school at all, because I looked at the data that you said, and I mean, that was just really high numbers to me in terms of truancy and chronic absenteeism, but I knew that it was mixing in students who came to school but didn't necessarily attend classes with the same data of students who weren't coming at all. However, I believe that we have some responsibility, particularly with respect to students who don't come at all, because they could be in a terrible situation at home, they could be being abused or neglected. So one of the things that I'm concerned about is what systems do we have in place? Because there used to be truant officers years ago who went to your house and said, what's going on here, and how do we get this kid back in school? Because those kids are kids we really need in school, right? Because we don't know what's going on at home. And then there's a whole nother issue. We talk about what happens once we get them in the building and we're responsible for them. So that, I just want to make that clear. And I do understand, it doesn't have to be broken down to me what you're reporting to the state, because I really frankly don't care about what you're reporting to the state. I really care about kids getting to class when they're in school and kids being attended to if they're not coming to school. So I understand and I know that's the data that you're presenting, but not all data really paints the picture that we need to be looking at.
And you bring up some very, very valid points. We wanted to just kind of level playing field so everyone understood that this basic understanding, but yet we need to get to everything that you just said.
Right.
Did you want?
I believe you had a question
Oh.
on the team call. Okay, Jerome, go ahead.
I was just stating, for how Dr. Cavallo's back to superintendent, she just came up with this new, building structure plan that requires every school to now have truancy officers, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so,
They're saying yes.
okay, so do we know when those truancy officers will come in place for this, or what?
Direct over to HR over there.
Yeah, Mr. Pavoni is, so part of it obviously is reviewing the entire budget for the school and make sure that it's allocated in our positions and pay. So that way we have the funds necessary to hire those positions, and Dr. Hill is there as well. And that'll be the next step. And then after that point, those positions will be posted and we'll work with the local municipalities to be able to hire for those positions.
After the board approves it, of course, right?
Right, the board approves the positions,
And
yeah,
the
so,
office,
yeah.
Did you hear that answer, Jerome?
yeah, and I was just saying, the only reason why I brought that up is because Judge Chase made a great point when she was talking, whereas we used to have truancy officers. So I just wanted to know where we were in that process, because if we had that in place already, we wouldn't have to be having some of these problems that we're having.
So to get to the chronic absenteeism and chronic truancy, this on the screen, this is the district at the end of last school year.
I have one question before we
Yes, ma'am.
jump to that. So, I'm just making understand, so I was talking to Gillespie, because she's a teacher, so kids coming to her class and 15 minutes before class, and students, they not aware of this, because if they know that they can come to school and go in 15 minutes before, that's gonna be their class, and they get it counted for class time. And it's not gonna help the student at all, because they're gonna miss half of their class time. So is this something with the state? Oh, this is out of our control. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's with the state, so I know what you're saying, but I know that as a teacher, when they come in, the state is not really looking at tardies. We're looking at tardies. So they'll get that tardy, but per the state, they get counted as present. So that's a culture thing within the buildings that we have to, solve with the students, understanding you need to be there.
Right, and it's the cultural thing within the building, and also taking the attendance information that's in Power School, looking at the students that have a bunch of tardies, and putting interventions in place for those students. So a chronically tardy student does not matriculate to be a chronically truant student, does not matriculate to be a chronically absent student. So, and then this information here on the screen, this is, like I said, at the end of last school year. This and every graph that we presented goes to the school leaders on a weekly basis. So every Monday, the school leaders have this information, and we just gave you a high-level view of it, but they can click into it and find every single student that is chronically absent, chronically truant, and we track it here at the district level, and then provide information to the building leaders. Say, here, these are the students that are chronically absent. Here they are.
How are you tracking that?
So we track it. So we've created a giant data matrix for the district. I don't know.
Do you have it individualized at each school?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's by right. It's by
Okay.
school. Each school gets their own, so they don't have to split out. East, West, or PMSA. It's by each school, and then.
But again, just like this figure includes kids that don't come to school at all, and kids that come to school and miss classes, all clumped together. So are we saying like 95% of the kids in the district don't either come to school at all or miss classes? Because that's a really high percentage to me.
It's all rolled together.
It's all rolled
I understand
together.
that, but still, regardless, it's
Right.
very high.
That's put together or not.
we may need to, and I'm just outside looking in, we may need to disaggregate that data to a sense. And then I'm looking from a standpoint, we're talking about, you know, truant officers, and I'm just speaking from a former principal that came from districts that may not have had funding for truant officers. We had someone in that space to keep track of those students that were not present in school. Reason being, as the judge mentioned earlier, some are going through some trauma situations at home. There are reasons why they're not present. So since we don't have a truant officer in place now, what are we doing in the interim to reach out and connect to those students? Because that's when we have to do what I call think outside the box. They're here, we don't have a truant officer right now. We know that truant officers were not budgeted for this school year. While we're seeking funding for that, what will we do in the interim? I know we have grade level principals, I know we may have some deans, but it has to be someone, administrative assistants, to pick up the phone, to call, to touch base with these families, to say, hey, what's going on? How can we be a support?
And that may be something that the parent coordinator.
And that's right. So that's when they think outside the box, where what resources we have already in place that can support us in this regard, and the parent coordinator will be a go-to person for that.
And I may be jumping ahead. This is all, when I was looking at the data, and then something you just said. So at the district level, because I know that at the building level, it hasn't been shared where the teachers and everybody look at it. And I would like to be able to, when we're in the
Down to the
procedures,
students, who the students are.
to look at it.
Right.
And so something I'm always having a problem with is that if the district is looking at this information and you're touching it every day, then to me, that's where the district-wide policy should be coming from. Because I think part of the problem is we say one proviso, but with 3 schools doing it 3 different ways, and there's certain policies and procedures that need to be standard so that if you're having truancy conversations with parents, it doesn't matter what school you're coming from, it's a Proviso Township policy. And I think this is where we kind of lose grip, because I know we do it one way at West, and there's expectations at East. But if it's district-wide, then we're all standing on the same policy and principles of making sure that the students are here, and what are the guidelines and the consequences or follow-ups and interventions behind it.
And I think one of the areas that can help this team here is just seeing what is shared on a weekly basis to then help support, all right, then what can we do with this information? So on that slide, this little pie chart right here was the one thing shown, but there's a wealth of there's no shortage of data being shared with the districts, with the schools. But you can basically then go into this pie chart, like we said, and with the power of Excel, you can go in and then drill into what are those students. You can sort and rank it by most number of absences or tardies, whatever information you want to look at. But this will allow those school leaders, and then however what is decided with policy, to then help support those efforts, because everything is there. We have access to everything and being shared, so we can make those improvements and changes.
That's great, but again, we have to segregate students that don't come to school at all from students that come to school and don't go to class. And because we've got to figure out how to address those as separate issues.
And this was last year's, and this year's information, the school leaders are receiving students who have not been to school at all in the past week. So they'll know there'll be a number 47. There's 47 students who have not shown up to school in the past week. And that was a lot of response from the building leaders and the schools and everyone to be able to, again, like you're saying, drill into those kids, because it's 2 different issues.
Absolutely.
It's 2 different issues.
Get them in class. If they're in school, that's your job.
There's a lot, attendance is a tough nut to
Does anybody
crack.
go wellness check? Like anybody, for example, when the students are absent consecutively, 2, 3, 4 days, does anybody in the school building ever says, you know what? We need to contact the local police or somebody to do a wellness check? Does anybody
As a
do that?
teacher, I call home, if I don't see a kid, at the beginning of the year, I'll be honest, when I don't see them, I'm calling home just to make sure, is this kid still attending, planning to attend? And then, if I get a student that is all of a sudden, or they've come and then they don't come anymore, well, now I need to check or follow up with the counselor. But is there like one entity that does that? No.
Yeah, so like at East, like the grade level, when I was there, grade level principals, we would call home and we see a pattern, the student's not coming, but it's not like everybody's doing it.
It's not
And
consistent.
sometimes she's not talking about necessarily just calling the parent.
I know,
She's talking about calling DCFS or calling an
I mean, we
entity.
do when, in previous schools that I worked at, now even at Pace, when we see a pattern that this kid is not here, and we have reached out via phone, text message, email, send, even the principal and I will get in the car and go knock on the door.
Well, our social worker does it at
Somebody.
East. So you will have like our social workers that go out and we'll say, hey, you know, Ms. Merchants used to do those home visits and say, this kid been missing AYZ days, they haven't been in. Even if we have a family that we constantly call and can't get in contact with, it's time to go do a well-being check at this home, do this kid, like, is this their numbers or what, you know what I'm saying? So we have someone, but it's not like designated, they doing it because.
And like you said, at East.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're saying that that happens at East, but we're not hearing that that's consistent throughout.
It's not, yeah.
Because I mean, it just makes it look to me like there's no relationships being built with the families and the schools. There's, like, nobody is connecting with anybody.
Yeah,
And it makes you wonder why.
yeah,
Like, where's the connection? Where's the unity?
yeah, because it's.
Like you said, one proviso, where is it?
Yeah.
So we get a state funding based on how many kids attend each year. So doesn't it, when this data goes to the state, isn't this part of the data that the state uses to determine, so it's in our best interest as a district to get every kid possible in school, because that increases our school funding.
Correct.
Yeah. But the other thing is a call to DCFS requires them to go out and find out what's going on, and if it does nothing, it scares parents when you get a visit because they're doing an investigation. So I wonder at what point, and I don't, because I can't tell of the kids that are chronically absent or truant, how many of those individual kids are really absent for lots and lots of time, right? You can't tell from the data, right? But now you're saying that the data is going to be broken down, so they will be able to tell if you have a kid that's missing 3 or 4 days every week of school.
Right, that was an intentional reaction based on, we were looking at it, just getting away from us. So it doesn't get away from us in second day of school, second week of school. So just keep, we have the information, but this is why this group is here. Figure out how do we take it and actionize it to the best advantage using the resources that we have.
Because for me now, I don't really know, as a taxpayer, what percentage of kids don't come to school at all in Proviso who should be here, and what percentage of kids are going to school and hanging out in the hallway or whatever, wherever they go when they're in school. Or can they leave? Do they leave?
No, we have closed campus that are not supposed to leave, but do
Okay,
they
but that's the
leave?
difference.
Yes.
You might ask, do they leave?
Yeah.
Because to me, I hear at Proviso West that those doors aren't locked, and that there are ways for them to leave the
Oh, yeah.
campus.
Well, all
buildings.
Yeah,
they're locked, but
they can go out of a door.
Because then my other question becomes, once my kid reports to school,
Yeah.
and then my kid is missing and off somewhere in the community and gets shot or
Oh, yeah.
something, then who's liable, right? Because once that kid reports to school, so like I say, I think we really have really two separate real issues. Like, how do we get them in class? How do we account for them when they're in the building? And then how can we help those students who aren't coming?
Yeah, because we have had a parent to come up to the school and get our student.
And
So
they're
we
not
pulled the schedule up, and that kid is not in that class. The parent was there for 2 hours looking for a kid. So you had the whole security, everybody's looking for this one kid. The kid had left the building. And it's
Well, when they go through a locked door, does it alarm?
No. Yeah, so maybe that's something they need to put alarms on the doors, I don't know, you know.
Let me ask you a question,
Yes.
so you're saying, how many students are being, so it's reported weekly, how many students are absent, correct?
Correct.
No, okay.
Right.
At each school,
At each school, and it's reported for the year-to-date,
okay.
from first day of school to present, and then just the previous week.
So I have another question. No-shows, if say, I have Debbie Brooks on my class roster, and she is a no-show for 7 days in a row, how is she counted, as a no-show or?
She's just absent because she's not in her class. She just comes to part. If she attends 6 classes, she's still present. But if she only misses Debbie's class every day, she's present. But if she misses Debbie's class and another class, she might be half present. And if she misses all of her classes, then she's not present, she's absent.
I guess my question really is.
So when does it become truancy then?
Right, that's.
Then they roll it all up. What we're saying to you guys is the way it's reported to the state is that rolls it all up into truancy. So these numbers you're getting merged together, kids who come to school, half go to class, don't go to class, with kids who never come to school. That's what we're talking about. That's why we can't really tell from this data, that the way it's reported to the state, what is really going on, because the data merges her and she becomes a part of your chronic absenteeism or your chronic truancy definition.
And that's why locally, internally, this year we're separating out the students who, it's always easier to work with data in blocks of time. So if I always work with, this is this week, these are the kids who have not shown up at all to school at all. Here you have week 2 of the school year. Now you go to the next one, here you have week 3 of the school year. Okay, this student has been on the list for both weeks.
So so is there a hot system where once a kid reaches a certain point, where it reaches chronic absenteeism for that kid, or chronic truancy for that kid, is it highlighted, is something done? So, I mean, we're getting the data, but the question we're asking is at what point are we intervening and looking at what we need to do to address the circumstance? Because you're just producing data, doesn't mean that there's any results from that data.
When we spoke a few weeks ago, I recall you telling me that those numbers accumulate. And then once they reach, is it 17 or 18 total, then that's when it becomes chronic?
So yeah, if we were to look at the definitions, if we were to start with chronic truant, right? So everything is based on membership. For most of our students, their membership is going to be 176 days, because there are 176 school days. That's, again, by Illinois state law, we have to have that many school days. So that this number of chronic truant is ever changing every day of membership as it goes on. So it's tough. It's not impossible, but it's tough to give something like that, all right, they're marked chronic truant because based on the number of days that we've had school and the number of days since they've been in, that truancy, if they continue to show up, that may change because the percentage of their absences based on their membership days, it's an ever-changing number. So the truant is between 5 and 10% of days. So if we were to look at it and say 176 days, I'm just going to call it 180 because it's a little easier to deal with it mathematically, then that's what, 8 days of being absent. They're considered a chronic truant. And then above that is then the chronic absent. If they are absent more than that, they're absent 10% of membership days. And so again, 10% of 176, or call it 180, that is then that 18 days.
So Sam, that could mean, on your question, any kid who attended less than 6 periods on the 7 periods is eventually going to could potentially flow into being a chronic truant or a chronic absent. So that's why we're saying that there's two different issues. One is someone who really is chronically truant because they don't show up to school for 7 days or 10 days or whatever it is. The other is kids who come to school but end up on this list because they're there and they're not going to class.
Yeah, I think part of the confusing thing is we use that word truant is maybe they're just skipping class, like that's our working vocabulary
I've
of
done
truant.
that.
Right.
It's
Right.
like you're-
Truant to me is not coming at all.
Yeah.
Right, and here again, just using that state verbiage of a chronic truant, just, it's all dealing with absent and the percentage of absences based on how many days they've been in school. That's what they call membership days, how many days they've been in school. And that absent, chronic absent is, again, missing 10% of membership days.
Can I ask Larissa a question? If I'm in your class and I don't show up to class, but I'm in school that day, do I get a 0 that day and that gets averaged into my overall average? So even if I could come take a test from you and score 100 on the test, because I'm just smart, but I never showed up for class, how is that averaged into the overall grade for that student?
So you're asking about attendance being, or?
I'm saying, is you come into class, because you can't participate if you're not there, so let me call it class participation, right?
We don't, so technically,
Okay.
participation is not something that, they don't want us counting that as, I'm telling you this as a teacher. Now, if we're going to assignments, the district policy, but somebody told me that they went and looked at it and it wasn't in there, has always been since I've been here, if a student is unverified, then you don't have to let them make up the work. So then, if they're not there, then they're not doing the work or getting the work or whatever the case is. Now, when we had the 50 policy, what you're talking about was possible, which means that they can get 50s all the way through and never show up, and then they come in and take a test and we had kids pass. So we don't have that.
50 policy.
We don't have the 50 policy, but I mean,
It just seems to me that class participation encourages me, if that's gonna be part of my grade, it would maybe, I mean, I don't know. But
So
it
I
might
think
maybe encourage me to go to class, because then I'm just gonna be graded whether I
it's
show up
kind
to
of
class or
it's
not.
kind of a culture thing, because you'll have, some administrations that will come in and, you got a culture of kids that don't participate, so they don't want to ding the kids, so they won't, add it. And then you have some that, there are some things you have to participate in, like choir and band and drama and theater. There's some participation there that has to happen. So, I mean, I guess in a very roundabout way, as a teacher, you find a way to incorporate it. If you're not here, I can't teach you. And then what you find is that students that are, I want to make sure I'm using the correct term, chronic in any way, they're disengaged. So when they come in, those students, if they've been out sick or something like that, that's a different beast to deal with. But a student, like we're talking about these kids in the hallway, when they finally do show up to class, they don't care about participation. They don't care about being engaged. They just have to be somewhere that period, because somebody has said you need to be out the hallways. And so that is another beast to deal with, because then we're talking about changing the classroom culture and the expectations there. So again, for me as a teacher, it just goes back to, I'm coming to these meetings, I want to know about, truants and absence, but I also want to know how this data is going to help us develop district policies that we all can learn and adhere to, that don't necessarily penalize the student, but hold students, parents, and everybody else accountable for making sure the students are in the seats.
So teachers, we was looking for a student, teachers say, oh, this student haven't been here for the last 3 semesters, or what, 2 semesters. When do you let someone know?
Well, DCF should have been called in on
Yeah,
that.
so they just hold this information. We was looking for kids to take the test, and they had to do the test in their school or whatever, and we'll go around with
That's
the,
when we look for them.
Yeah, and then kind of find out, that's what we look for, you're
That's
right.
what we look for.
And then kind of find out they haven't been to the class period. Like they on my roster, but they never attend.
Let me tell you guys why this is so concerning to me. We gave a police officer examination 2 weeks ago, Saturday in Bellwood. There were 7 African Americans that sat for that examination out of 34 people. Of those 7, 4 of them came out of District 209. One African American who did not come out of District 209 scored an 80, so he passed the test. we had 2 people score on 100 percentile. 8 point something, 8, not 8, 8 point something, 11 point something, and then the rest of the African Americans and the Hispanics scored below 50 percentile. You have to get a 70 to pass the examination. So when you start looking at this, and they're functionally illiterate, and they were wonderful. They were so talkative, and they were the 2 girls. We were so excited because we're always looking for women to be police officers. And then when we looked at the test score, I mean, really, I was literally crying because then we say in our communities we want people that look like us and representation. But really, 7.85. So I called the testing service to find out how many questions were on the test, what grade level the test was set at. There were 200 questions on the test, so she got 15 questions right. And they told me the test is set between the 11th and 12th grade level. And it is not about policing, it's just a fundamental test. So I'm just telling you guys that, if they're not going to class, they're not learning how to read, and they're graduating functionally illiterate, and it's going to impact them, and it's going to impact our communities going forward. So that's why I guess it's so important for us to start really looking at it.
Ms. Flores, I have a question. So in your classroom, how do you break it down? Because I know back in our days, high school years, it was 100% the teacher will break it down, okay, 30% is for attendance, 20% is for participation, and so forth and so on.
As far as the grade?
Yes.
So the grades are, the weighting scale for semesters, and Mr. Ashaw, make sure I'm on track with this. The weighting scales for the semesters are weighted by the district. It's a 40-40-20 split. So quarter 1, 40%, quarter 2, 40%, and then final exam 20%, average it out, that's your semester grade. Now, I think what you're asking me is about how is it weighted in my class. I can't weight it. We have a department weight. So whatever the department decides the weight is. So I can't we used to be able to individually weight it. We can't anymore. So right now in the English department, it's 40% summative, 30. So summative is like the final exam or the whole. It's 30% formative, which means that like quizzes, you're building up to it. Then you've got 20% skills practice. And skills practice is like we do vocabulary or homework or something like that.
But where does attendance come into play?
It does not.
So that's a part.
So what Ms. Gillespie is describing, I'm just trying to find the actual.
So yeah, we used to say if you attendance counted in the grade, they stopped. Yeah.
So your question about the category weighting, Ms. Gillespie, is right. It is set. That's each department in the school has specific categories for how they grade. And this last time that this was looked at, this was adopted in 2015 and hasn't changed since. So it's another thing.
2015?
2015. So that. As again,
Except
another thing that you guys are here, and the idea of able to influence policy, that possibly making some suggestions with that. Let me make this bigger. So what Ms. Gillespie was describing for English, let me just blow that up. So what she was describing as summative assessments. So in her English courses, 40% of a student's grade is based off of summative assessments. Again, that idea of a summative is you're assessing student over a large amount of information, typically a chapter test, if you will, something, again, more large amount of information versus formative. Formative could just be, okay, I'm going to assess you on what you learned today. Right? It's a small check, a small assessment. That's 30% of the grade. You have what they call skills practice at 20, and then there's your participation is at 10. And this is just for English. And if
So if you don't come
scroll,
to class, you can't get 10. That's going to impact your 10% for participation.
Yes, and I will,
What you can also see is not consistent because every department is not.
Different.
exactly. So, and I would say even within English teachers, possibly I don't want to make too far of a jump, that the participation grade may be used differently. I don't know how consistently
Well,
it is, but
we haven't
it's-
used it, because like I said, once something gets, embedded and, you take into teacher evaluations and things like that, you don't want to, you got a lot of people that'll bark at anything that they feel will be punitive. So when you say, I'm gonna take off for, you haven't been here, I'm gonna take off for attendance, because attendance is participation, well then you've got, different entities that may frown upon that. So I know that, in my classroom, participation is actually what it is. You actually participate. So if we do a play, or a skit, you participate. If you chose to sit it out and you didn't want to do it, then you don't get that grade. So,
So if you're not there, then you can't get the grade, even though you don't call that attendance, right?
well, yeah, if you're not there, you're not doing the work. So you're not going to get any of those grades.
And ultimately, you want the grades to reflect what students are able to do, and I think, what this committee is talking about is having systems of support in place for those students that are not coming to class, because with multi-tier systems of support and establishing something that I hear you, Mr. Gillespie, in regards to what we need to do as a district to unify that process and to have a process across the board that captures all
Because
students.
I think that's what's kind of eluded us, and we're
Yeah.
spinning our wheels because we keep doing it one proviso, but it's not one proviso. And I also think that when we're hiring people for these positions, that's something else that gets away from us, is that you can have truancy officers, but if they're not held accountable and trained and told, this is what we need, this is what we want, these are, it's a checks and balances system. You just got people going knocking on doors, hell, I can do that. You have to have people that are actually going to be accountable and do the interventions and processes and work within the school and outside the school. And the information has to be free flowing for all, because I know that as a teacher, there are times I'm told, well, you can't have access to this information. Well, wait a minute, I got this kid sitting in my class, why can't I know? Or be a part of decision-making when it comes to our conversations. And I'm not talking about SPED, I'm just talking about students in general.
And ultimately, that speaks to what your concern is in distinguishing between the reasons students aren't coming to class. Whether maybe they moved to a different state and they don't even live in Illinois anymore, compared to a student that's just coming to school, mom's dropping them off, and then they walk away. And so those teams that all consist of a multitude of different groupings, teachers, social workers, administration, and a variety of other different areas, look at students individually, because they all have their own unique stories and reasons for why they're not coming to school. And it's the beauty of having those teams and those committees within the school, those intervention teams or MTSS teams that are focused strictly on attendance, is that it does get down to the heart of the story of why the student's not coming. So when you're talking about a student, and somebody mentioned it might have even been you, the idea that a student might be going through something at home, right? Or they might be in trouble in some way, right? That team, and that's why you have the diversity of different roles on that team to be able to assess what those underlying issues are for that student. It helps them academically, but also social emotionally, because it allows for us to tier the students. These students, and with your tier 1 students for attendance, those are things that, like the things that you're talking about.
You know you're gonna have to explain.
Yeah, that's what I break it down. So
So
those tier 1 students, it's the general population of students. The students that may be missing here and there, I'm sorry, it's not, I'm not going to turn to you. Maybe missing here and there, those things that could happen within the classroom with the teacher communication, home, referrals to counselors, those sort of things. And then with our tier 2 and tier 3, that means the very top of tier 3, it's a pyramid, right? So the students at the very top, the tier 3 students, those are the students that are the most extreme. They require the most intervention, the most extreme intervention, potentially outside sources to assist. they're gonna have targeted interventions that will escalate things to a different level to be able to help those students. And that's the beauty of being able to break it down like that, because you do start to dissect exactly what those needs are and be able to put in place measures to assist those students and those families if needed. And so I think that that's what I'm hearing from this committee, is that some internal procedures that we need to ensure that are in place across the board, not just at individual schools, but all of our schools, right?
Mr. Gary, he had, last year he was there, but Gary had a nice one in place.
Yeah.
When I say nice, and he would meet with the parents, they'd be in the auditorium,
Yeah.
and they was like, your student will be dropped from class, what's going, he'd get down to the nitty gritty. And it brought
Rucker
the
and
attention.
Sally, two
Oh,
did a lot of
absolutely.
work.
And then the students, you know, if it's done right, they move out of those tiers. They
Yeah,
move back
absolutely, yeah.
into tier one where you know,
Yeah.
you realize you don't, that helps you prioritize and be
Yes.
able to focus your greatest attention on what is needed in particular for each individual student. And so
You
that's
know,
something
one of the things I'm not hearing is connection of any of the students with any staff members. Because students should be able to connect with somebody in that building. They need to be able to trust, whether it's the custodian, the secretary, the principal, the social worker, anybody. They should be able to trust somebody and then get the wheels turning and see how that student, family, or whomever can be helped. But I'm not hearing of any connections being.
Well, I'm not hearing accountability for anybody.
And
And I'm talking about students,
I'm talking about the
parents,
schools. That's right,
teachers,
seriously.
whoever. I'm not hearing that
Seriously.
there's any accountability.
And even the
That-
state.
That's the problem, because students are accountable too.
Yeah.
Right, you
Yeah,
come
that's
into
what
my
I'm saying.
building, you're
Students.
accountable to get to class, okay? Parents are accountable for getting their students to the school. And what I'm seeing here is just a total lack of accountability all the way around, right? Kids don't wanna go to Clarissa's class,
Yeah.
because Clarissa's mean and makes
Right.
her do some work. So they gonna come to Gay's class, because she cool and we
Right.
like her. I mean,
Yeah,
there's an
absolutely.
accountability
No, it's
issue
not.
when those kinds of things can happen in a district. Right, and I know we're not gonna solve problems overnight, because this is not just, it's not just the people in this room, and it's not just teachers that can fix this stuff, but but we have to start with accountability. If your kid is not coming to school at all, then we're gonna call DCFS on you. Because we're mandatory reporters, and when we don't see a kid for weeks at a time, as a mandatory reporter, something should be done, right? And that's down to the teacher level, because the teacher is a mandatory reporter as well, okay? So that's the first thing, that's the first place to start. Then there's some accountability on the parent who's supposed to get the kid to school.
So the teacher is the first line of, you know, and one of the things I will say is that, you know, regardless of what's going on, we are told, and, you know, that's one of the first things they ask you. Did you call home? Did you make contact home? We have to log that. And so I'm gonna say this without, if nothing else, I will say this in the 20+ years I've been here, Proviso teachers and staff are really good at creating relationships, and I think we take that for granted. We don't put it on record as much as we should, but I know very few staff, I mean down from janitors on up, that we, you know, it's
Are
the,
you
it's
talking
the,
about at West or East?
no, I'm talking district-wide.
District-wide.
I mean, but I know that,
There are many kids
right,
who
because
rely
I'll
very
use this as
heavily
an
on their
example.
teacher.
There's a teacher at East who has a student that transferred to West. And that teacher called me and said, hey, Gillespie, this kid is coming over here. I said, send them to my room so that they know that I got a set of eyes on them. So now you know, you're coming across the district, but I'm looking at you. And so, you know, we naturally do that. So, and I know at East, you know, we do it, but I think that, is there a set policy on, you have to create a relationship? No. We do it organically. I think it's always been part of the Proviso way. Again, my thing is just using the data to make sure, because again, for the years that I've been here, it's not working doing it building by building. It has to be set in policy at the district, and that way.
But remember, listen, even when we make a policy, if it is not implemented,
Well,
and
yeah,
there is no
right.
accountability to everybody who's supposed to adhere to
not
the
enforced.
policy.
Well, but that's
not
been the problem with it being at the building level.
Right.
Because at the district level, it's set. At the building, I've had like 9 or 10 principals. So that changes. Everybody comes in with a new idea, but if you are rooted in at the district level, implementation, accountability, and then I'm just gonna say it, you gotta stop being afraid of what parents are gonna say. We are the parents to these students when they're in the building. Their safety. So when they're coming in, and we get people all the time, well, I don't want the parents coming up here tripping. Let them trip. Because we have the data that says you need to send your student to school. You need to make sure this kid is in the seat. So as a district, we have to decide. It's okay. They're gonna buck. They're gonna be angry. But the bottom line is, if we're doing it, what's best for the students, and that's what we're doing.
And so once we gather the data, which you can give us, then that data has to be effectively, there has to be a policy to effectively carry out these steps that we're talking about to assist that student.
And the
But there
community
has
needs to see the data.
Yeah,
The
the
community
community
needs to
should,
see the
because,
data.
I mean, when I looked at that, I was like, that looks like 95% of the kids
It's not
don't come to school and they're absent. That's alarming, right? But once again, so as we talk about making policy, it does us no good to sit here and write a policy that's not gonna be implemented, and there's gonna be no accountability on those who are expected to carry it out.
And to that point, attendance is probably one of the most difficult policies to write because it's constantly ever changing with how the students are in the building or not in the building. And it's gotta be sustainable and implementable regardless of what level of resources we have.
Right,
So that as resources increase, okay, now we can take the policy and then go to the 2.0 version of it. But we have to make sure that
But I suppose as a taxpayer, because I've been paying taxes to this district for 30 years, and my question then becomes, what has happened, over the years, to get us to this point where we're almost at ground level in building a truancy program, right? But I guess we have to start somewhere. All we can do is start, right? Because, I mean, it's just alarming to me because I really believe that there are many students, well, you're gonna get hit with new state law anyway, that's gonna require you to have social workers in place, for students who are traumatized, right? The new trauma legislation at the state level, but it's just amazing to me that we should really have a handle on those people that are in that top tier. And we should be able to say very clearly for any student that entered that top tier, these are the programs we put in place.
And the reality is that the policy is pretty comprehensive. It's a matter of execution of that policy. It's the protocols that.
That's what I'm saying, sometimes it's not the policy that's the problem, it's whether or not we can enforce it.
You're enforcing it. You can put it there all you want, but if you're not gonna enforce it.
It's just kind of like, if you tell me you did something in education and when you set those levels in 2015, I know from people, all my friends who work in education, that from 2015 to 2023, there have been massive changes, even in the way we teach, right? To say that we've not even looked at that
Well,
since
we have.
2015.
We've revisited it.
Yeah.
But your policy did not reflect
The
that.
breakdown, yeah, the dates, but we have revisited, I know in the English department, we revisited and decided, is this how we want to continue? How is it, working with, the students, the skill sets of the students that we have? How is it working with, our SPED and ELL population? So we have revisited. We do have an updated document. That one.
Yeah, that's the one that's shown because that's the last time it was, the official. I would just
So
say,
that helps.
It's part of our
Yeah.
professional development in our department to look
yeah.
at it.
And anything with grading, I would just say, just to your point with, and I think Ms. Clark said it, so Mr. Reich, that grading should reflect what a student knows. So I just want to be very careful with ever implementing something like participation, or you have to be in attendance and you get points. A grade should always reflect what a student has.
But participation reflects what you know. If you're answering questions in class, if you work, see, to me, and I do not believe in high-performing schools on the North Shore. I do not believe that they are not counting what those kids do in class and what they say. When you get to our schools, all of a sudden there become excuses. But we don't wanna be too hard.
Right.
Okay, you know, we don't want to, I can't buy
But that's
that.
why I have it's another issue too, because you know what, there's always the demand of, you know what, for the educators, okay, we got more money, but then what is the level of our education within our communities? That goes down, but their pay goes up, and what is it going up for? Just to give them a higher salary, or is it for them, for us to have an expectation of what they're going to be instructed to the students that attend that school? Because you can't have it up here, but they're down here, where it really counts is the students. They're down here and they're not getting the education.
But in our district, our
That's the
teachers
problem.
also are not getting,
Oh, yeah, we
so,
know that.
so those are the two most important levels, the student and the teacher.
Right.
But other salaries keep going up and up
And
and
that's,
up.
well, I shouldn't have said the
administrative, right,
administration. I
absolutely.
shouldn't have said education. But administrators.
Or not. But again, you're right, I
That's a
mean, all we
concern I
can do
have.
is start now, but what I do wanna tell you is that our kids have to be held to as high a standard as any other.
Thank you. Right.
Okay, that we have to stop making
As a tax-
excuses
right.
because
What
we
am I paying?
think that maybe they don't go to sleep at night till late and whatever other excuses we come up with
Right.
as it relates to,
Thank you.
impoverished communities. And then we excuse it. No.
No.
In the North Shore, you're not gonna tell me that there's not a participation grade, because if it weren't, those parents would be up there raising Cain
That's
for
right.
their kids who participate all the time, and they're not getting credit for it. There's extra credit, there's all kinds of things that kids can do, so as far as I'm concerned, I can't buy that, oh, I don't wanna offend, you know, if I don't wanna say, no, I wanna say, if you come to class and participate, I'm not just talking about showing up, and participate, you get points for that.
I would say that the participation, my only pushback with participation would be part of a formative assessment then, rather than calling it participation. That's my own, and it may be a minutia with words.
Yeah,
I just,
but you do
all the
understand what I'm
research,
saying,
oh
right?
no, absolutely, all the research reflects that a grade should be based on what a student understands, and whether it's like has mastered, you see those words, but it should be what they know and can demonstrate that they know. That's what that grade should reflect, not that I was here. Like, give me
No,
my-
and I don't believe that participation just means I'm here.
Yeah,
It
no,
means
I-
that I'm
I-
participating in class activity.
And
Active
that would be part of
active
that
participation.
formative, like assessing that not only were you here, but you learned what was being taught today by that most knowledgeable person in the room, that
But
teacher.
if you don't attend, you can't do anything.
Well, I would like to thank everyone for coming. An email will be forthcoming with this information from Ms. Gordon.
Okay.
Our next committee meeting will be October 30th. The last Monday of the month. Here at 6 p.m. An email will be coming out. And thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, community, for showing up and showing out. Thank you.
So, Ms. Hickson, so are we gonna continue this
Yes, we are going to
conversation?
continue
Okay.
this conversation. We need you to come back.
Yeah.
Please come back.
We have to.
And I know you come back.
Let's start it.
Yeah.
And that's another action steps, and the action steps from there.
Right.
Yeah, that's
So
what
I'm saying, just like it's there's other ways we put the position on. Exactly. Sometimes it's not always. That's right, that's right.
I sent you the email.
Thank you.
I'm talking specific to this. Yeah, just let's get to the protocol.
That's why they didn't pass that I'm like, for the time since I got 7 didn't go to lunch, I got to wait tonight, I grabbed something.